Blaming drivers deflects accountability away from companies. Truth or myth? This one's true. There's a concept called the moral crumple zone. A moral crumple zone strategy is the human operator is a system component, and one of their jobs is to bear the brunt of moral and legal responsibility if something goes wrong. Now you might say, okay, well, if there's a human driver in a car and the car is designed as well as it can be, and the driver makes a mistake, they should bear the brunt of the responsibility. Okay, that's fair enough. But what if the system is designed a little differently? What if the system follows the following pattern, which is unfortunately increasingly common? The manufacturer designs a system that they know is likely to be unsafe in practice. And it's a system that people will inevitably make mistakes using. It's not a matter of people misbehaving, but just nobody's perfect, and this system will cause harm if a person is ever imperfect. So they're putting unreasonable requirements on the human operator, but they're going to install a human operator anyway, and in essence, when the bad thing happens due to some defect in the system, they're going to blame the human operator for being less than superhumanly perfect. What do you get when you do that? Well, if that's your strategy, what you end up with is scrutiny is deflected from the defect, and the safety defect is not corrected because you can just say, oh, well, the human operator was supposed to be perfect. That human was imperfect. Therefore, the fact that the system had a dangerous malfunction and we told the user it was their job to fix it, well, imperfect people can't fix it all the time. Sounds like we have a human driver problem. The outcome of a moral crumple zone strategy is predictable harm done to the users or potentially other road users. And the issue is that any design that requires a human to be perfect is really asking people to be superhuman. And that's just an unrealistic expectation. You won't get safety that way. Here's an example of the moral crumple zone in action with an autonomous vehicle testing. In March 2018, Uber ATG had a fatality with their test program. They were running a bunch of robotaxis over and over and over again in the area of Phoenix, Arizona, and eventually a pedestrian was killed. The situation was complicated. There was pressure to test aggressively. The testers are going through long hours of vehicles that they said were throwing them around, doing lots of aggressive maneuvering. Very uncomfortable, very tough on the drivers. Now, in this case, the driver who had the mishap was said to be distracted by a cell phone. Her side of the story is that there was a company cell phone that she was required to monitor, and that's what she was looking at. We're not going to try and litigate that here. The point is there are two sides to the story. Could the driver have been more attentive? Yeah, probably yes. Was the driver put in a no-win position? Arguably yes. Given the totality of the situation, it seems very likely that a fatality or severe injury was simply a matter of time, a matter of chance, which driver it happened to first. What happened as an outcome? Well, the operator faced a criminal trial. She did a plea deal to an undesignated felony, got probation, but she definitely was the one who bore the brunt of this mishap. Now, what happened to Uber? It's pretty clear that they did a lot of things that made it more likely such a mishap would happen. And there were plenty of things such as putting a second driver in, doing more aggressive driver monitoring, doing shorter shifts, giving better rest breaks. There are a bunch of things they might have done that could have avoided this mishap, but they didn't. What was their consequence? They faced no charges at all. They settled with the victim's family, and that was it. Now, to their credit, after the mishap, they got the message and they embarked on a safety path. From a legal point of view, the consequences they faced were quite minimal. Here's another story. This is about Tesla Autopilot having a double fatality. In December 2019, a Tesla driver was going 74 miles per hour and went through a red light at the end of a freeway. So the freeway ended, changed to city streets, and the car was still on autopilot, and apparently the human driver was not paying adequate attention. The driver was an off-duty limousine driver who had autopilot enabled. 2 people were killed in another vehicle who were crossing through a green light but were run into by this vehicle going through a red light. Tesla faced no charges. Now, they do not enforce highway-only operation, so this car went off a highway where it was designed to have autopilot running, onto city streets where autopilot is not intended to be operated. Autopilot remained enabled, and even though it's a beta feature, AutoSteer is the steering part of autopilot, Tesla faced no charges and no consequences. They've been arguing in court cases successfully that it's entirely on the driver to ensure safety, even though it's a beta testing feature. The driver faced a criminal trial. He eventually pled no contest to vehicular manslaughter with gross negligence and received probation. But this isn't done yet. Crashes are continuing to happen with multiple brands of automated steering, and the question remains open: how much, if any, exposure the company should have to the bad consequences of crashes? This is especially problematic when the system is designed in a way that it is reasonably expected that people have trouble managing safety due to automation complacency and other factors. Thus far, the attitude seems to be that the human driver is expected to be perfect, which humans aren't, and they're expected to be able to do beta testing without special training, which they don't have, and if something bad happens, it's entirely on the driver. The takeaway is that blaming drivers protects the company pretty well, but does not necessarily protect other road users.